Hello guys, how are we doing and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a Hacienda spawn guide. I finally managed to get a hold of enough research and data to be able to do this properly with enough confidence to put it out on YouTube. If you feel like Hardpoint on Hacienda is something you can't quite feel like you can get grips of, and you're not quite sure how the spawns work, this video is going to be for you 100%. So we're going to kick it off with a little bit of an intro. There's a bunch of new people with the channel, so I just wanted to explain what we're looking at here, what the different colors mean, what the circles mean, and go through it somewhat logically so you guys, if you are newcomers, sort of understand what's going on. So this is a top-down perspective of the map itself. Each ring represents a spawn area. So for example, on P1 specifically, there are 8 spawn areas for that hill, okay? Then there's callouts around the spawn, so that would be the lobby spawn or the lion spawn or the vine spawn, for example. So I'll sometimes refer to them as the color, sometimes I'll refer to them as the call out. So that's the main thing. You've then got 2 hills on the screen at any one time. Bright green one being the current, so P1, and the next hill, because it's always important to know how to rotate and what spawns to have closer to the next hill, is P2, and that's a little bit more opaque, a little bit more transparent than P1. If you have any questions, you can leave it down in the description below. DM me on Twitter, DM me on Discord, whatever's easier for you. A written format of this guide will be added to the Ranked Play guide shortly after this video, so make sure you check that out as well if you prefer to learn that way. And we're going to kick it off with P1. As you can see, there are pretty much spawns everywhere. We've already established there's 8 spawns on P1. Each side has 3 primary spawns. So on the right, they are situated in P2, lobby, and vines. And on the left, they are tin, vault, and like the space between hedge and P4. Each side then has a safe spawn used when the other team are pushed through whilst blocking their side, okay? So on the right, it's just behind the lion statue, and on the left, it's next to garden. So they're like the safe spawns for that area of the map. Now, generally speaking, the next person to spawn in will spawn in at the furthest point away from an enemy player, okay? If the enemy are pushing around the right, you'll spawn left. So for example, enemy, imagine this cursor was an enemy, they were pushed down around this right side, you're going to spawn there instead, okay? Now, the easiest way to block a particular spawn is to be closer to that spawn you're trying to block than anyone else on your team is pushed up to another spawn. For example, if you have teammates pushed up in these pink areas, you know, maybe you have someone P4, then you've got people top, someone on hill, but you generally sort of situate around that area of the map, the enemies will likely spawn tin because it's the safest spawn for them. It's the furthest away from you guys, okay? Other than this real safe spawn, which you're going to get to in a second. On the flip side, if the blue team starts to locate themselves in these areas, maybe they're pushed up towards the right-hand side of top mid, maybe like towards the closed area, they're on this side of P1, and they've started to push around to rotate to the new hill, the enemies are likely to spawn bang on the new hill at P2. This is why it's essential to have communication with your teammates. You need to know where they're pushing. You can use the tac map to know where they are if you're solo queuing, but that's why it's so important to know where your teammates are at all times, so you know where every kill you get, you know where the enemy's going to be spawning next. Now, you're probably wondering when we can see the use of these safe spawns, so like the garden one or the lion. Here's a real life example, because it's really quite rare, of how the game utilizes a secondary spawn. So as I say, it's the yellow or teal spawn. Now this happens because we can see here player 1, 2, 3, and 4 are evenly spread into each corner of the map, right? So 3's like got this bottom mid covered, bottom right had the vine side covered. Player number 1's got the P2 side covered. Player number 2 has sort of got this tin side covered. You know, they're quite close to this tin spawn, so it's unfair to spawn them there. Player number 4 has got real close spawns to hedges, so the enemy doesn't really have a safe space to spawn. So then it's going to look to use one of the 2 alternative spawns. So it's either going to use garden or it's going to use lion. Now, because this team, these 4 players, are slightly shifted towards the right-hand side of the map, the game says in its head, if the game had a head, it's going, okay, the safest spawn in this particular circumstance is this back one here, okay? And the same will happen on the other side if it were to happen, but just a flipped way around, okay? So that's why you'd use those. That's what we'd see. That's how we'd see a utilization of these alternative back safe spawns here and here. So let's take some scenarios now. Let's put ourselves into the mindset of someone who's actually in game. Now, if you find yourself, if you spawn vault or lobby, so either middle spawn, so this one or this one, it essentially means the enemy team are evenly spread across the map, but aren't pushed up enough to flip your side out. Makes sense. Now, if you spawn at any 4 of the other primary spawns, so here, tin, vines, and P2, it essentially means that the enemy has control of the other side of the map, but are putting emphasis towards the other primary spawn. Okay, so we've touched on a couple of examples already, but just to make it super clear, if you spawn vines, it essentially means the enemy has blue side of the hill, blue side area controlled, but they're pushed a little bit towards this left hand side here, towards P2 maybe, spawning you out here. Makes sense. Now, if you spawn at either alternative spawn, so either garden or lion, it essentially means the enemies have got control of pretty much all four corners of the map, but they've got a slight emphasis towards the opposite side of the map to the ones you've just spawned on. So we're going to go through a little bit of an example of some strategy on this hill that I like to implement when I'm playing. So the best way to get the most hill time out of this hill is to determine which spawn you want the enemy to spawn. Okay, do you want them to spawn in tin? Do you want them to spawn in vines? Where do you want them to spawn? And let's say we want them to spawn tin. Right, let's take that as an example. Let's say we want them to spawn tin because it's far away from P2. You then need people pushed up towards the top side of the map, holding this bottom side of the hill here, and that'll basically spawn them tin. From there, you can play for cuts. You can have whoever's in lobby, you can have watching this push around the vine side, because that's likely where they're going to go to P2. You can have people up top watching their exit or entrance from the pillars down here. Knowing where they spawn and controlling where they spawn makes it so much easier to hold them in that spawn, because you know what routes they have from that spawn, where you're putting them. But let's say if you don't have pink spawns, you really need to push around either side as a team. Now, chances are, if you're gonna, because for P2, obviously you want to rotate, you want to get these back spawns for P2, which we're going to get onto in a second. But let's say you don't have this, you're not lucky enough, or you're not fortunate enough to have these pink side spawns off the rip, and you want to flip. You've just got to push around either side as a team. Chances are you're going to have more success getting around safely through this bottom side here, because teams are going to put naturally more emphasis up towards this P2. But generally speaking, that's what you sort of want to do. Push around as a team, win your gunfights. Let's say you were tin and you push around vines and you were getting kills. The enemy team are literally going to spawn up here. Okay, so they're probably then going to meet you somewhere around P2. But just have that in your head as you're pushing around. And then once you get the pink spawns, you can then defend it as we've just established. Moving on to P2 here, the main two spawns, as I say, are pink, which is at lion, and then blue, which is pretty much in the kitchen area. The alternative spawns are yellow, which is in vines, teal between hedge and P4, and then red, which is literally pretty much on the hedge itself. Now, these spawns open up when the two primary spawns are blocked. Now, pink remains the default spawn, okay? If it is left open, then this will be the next place people spawn. Similar to P2 on Vault, let's say, as an example. The next spawn is then blue, then yellow, and then if all three of those spawns are blocked, it opens up teal. And if those four, including teal, are now blocked, it opens up red. Okay, so red's like a last resort spawn. You'll spawn there if the enemy's got control, or at least decent exposure to the other four spawn points. Blocking wise, you can block the lion spawn from being anywhere back of this region. Pretty much anywhere in this area can block this pink spawn. The blue spawn can be blocked by being into like mid-map or into TV slightly maybe. And then the vine spawn can be blocked by being slightly away from P2 in the pink spawn area. So you can see here there's a real nice couple of areas where you can block both the yellow spawn and the pink spawn, which is what you're going to want to try and do at some point. So you can block them from here. You can block it from being just into the lobby a little bit. You can block it from being sort of AS and D. There are areas you can block those yellow spawns. And then if you want to block teal, you just need to be pushed up closer towards the P4 outside of P2. So I haven't quite marked it here, but you can like sort of be this side of middle. You can be pushed through P2, and that'll basically make this block, because it's going to be like, okay, they're a bit close to this spawn. Let's move them a little bit further back, okay? And that'll spawn them red. So some scenarios. If you spawn pink, it simply means the enemy has left this spawn open. Nothing else to read into it, okay? If you spawn blue, it means the enemy are blocking pink spawns, so they're probably in the back here. They're probably coming off spawn as lions, so just bear that in mind when you spawn blue. That's why. Now, if you spawn yellow, it essentially means the enemies are in the lion area, so they're blocking the pink spawn, but they're closer to P2, so they're sort of more towards this zone here. Because otherwise, if they were over here, they're not going to spawn. You're not going to spawn here. So in order for you to spawn here, it means the enemies are probably going up the ramp. It means the enemies are also in middle as well, blocking blue. Nice bit of info. Now, if you find yourself spawning the other side of P4 in this teal zone, I don't really have a name for it, like squares here, I guess you could call it like far side P4, but in this teal area here, if you spawn there, that essentially means there's an enemy at the back blocking the pink spawn, middle blocking the blue spawn, and potentially located towards the yellow side of pink, blocking vines, okay? And that'll block yellow as well. So it essentially means blocking pink, blocking blue, blocking yellow, you've spawned teal. That's why that happens. Now, if you ever find yourself spawning all the way back here at the hedge, it means the enemy are holding backline spawns close to vines, which could be the same player. You know, you might have one player here, one player there, one player here, one player here, as or you spawned here. But chances are, if you spawned all the way here, the same player blocking pink is probably blocking vine spawns. It does then also mean there's players pushed up into middle. It means there's players pushed through P2, blocking teal. There's going to be players everywhere, and you have zero control of the map. You really want to avoid spawning here if you can. Now, strategy-wise, fighting for pink spawns here is clearly the best thing to do. Fighting for this spawn early will give you the best success, okay? This pink spawn here. Taking a route through vines is a good idea to break this spawn. If you don't have pink, taking a route all the way around this right is easy to break it. With the rest of your team, you need to do it as a team to get the greatest chance of success. And once you have these spawns, you can then set up for a good hold. So having someone block in the back, someone top dubs, dub steps, I guess you could call it, watching the push through rock, someone on time, and someone push through the through time will spawn the enemies red and funnel them into P4 zone. Okay, and when the players top mid, and so you don't have a player top mid, player push through P2, and then when these two die, because they're eventually going to lose a gunfight, because this player's going to, these guys are going to spawn so close, the players who are blocking and on time push and replace those players, and then the players who spawn in then take the replacement of those two players. It's like a conveyor belt. Okay, the furthest person forward dies, everyone else pushes up, that person spawns in behind and takes up the role that first player was before they pushed up to, you know, take your position. Moving on to P3, which is near this little fence area over here. The two main spawns here are pink, which is front garden, and blue, which is in vines. The alternative spawns open up when there's slight pressure towards the two primary spawns, okay, fairly self-explanatory. Now, you find these alternative spawns in lobby, hedge, and that real back right-hand corner, back right-hand corner of garden, which is gonna be the red for us. Now, as normal in Black Ops 6, the game will make you spawn at the safest possible spawn, which is normally the furthest one away from an enemy team member at any point in the map. You can block pink spawns by being pushed into tin or through this side, like the pink side of P3. So it could be top plat, it could be tin. Just generally, this side of P3 will block pink spawns. This will likely spawn them yellow or hedge, assuming your team are still spawning blue, blocking it. If all of your team pushes through P3 and you're all this area, the enemies will simply block. In order to spawn them yellow, you need teammates sort of coming off blue spawn at the same time as well. Okay, so if you do manage to get people push through P3, the enemies are going to start spawning yellow. Now, you can block blue by being pushed towards that side of P3. Okay, if you over push slightly, you overextend slightly through P3, the enemies are no longer going to spawn vines, they're going to then spawn lobby, so long as your team are controlling the pink area. Okay, it's the same sort of thing, but just flipped on its head a little bit. Now, if all four zones are blocked, spawn areas, spawn points, whatever you want to call them, are blocked, the game opens up the red spawn at the back right-hand corner of garden. Now, let's take some scenarios here. Let's imagine we're playing the game and we spawn pink or blue with your team. It simply means that's your default spawn and the enemy haven't pushed through the objective at all. Okay, that's simply what it means. They're settled on the objective, maybe if they're on it, and they're spawning the other side of the map. Fine. Now, if you spawn at lobby or hedge, so one of the two main alternative spawns, it simply means the enemy has control of the other side of the hill, and they're pushed through your side of the hill, spawning you a little bit further out. Okay, so they've got decent map control. If you find yourself spawning hedge or lobby, it's not good news. It means they've got pretty much solid control of the current hardpoint. If you ever find yourself spawning red, it means the enemy have control of the lobby side of the map. This area, this side of the map, but are also pushed through P3 and blocking a hedge, which they can do from like top office window, for example. But in order for that red spawn to open, these two also need to be blocked. Otherwise, that player who spawned here would simply have just spawned here. So these two spawns need to be blocked in order for that red one to be open. Now, strategy-wise, I personally prefer to have pink spawns here because it's really close to plat, and plat is a massive power position for P3. It literally overlooks the entire hill completely, and as a result, I prefer to have it. You can literally see the whole hill from there. You can have massive impact just from being in plat itself, and therefore I prefer the pink spawn because it gives you access to that good area a lot easier. And also, as a default spawn, it's closer to P3 than the other two default spawns, so it's a little bit easier to get to the route as long as they haven't pushed through P3 and spawned your hedge, or red, God forbid. Obviously, it's, as I say, it's personal preference, and I'd understand if people want to spawn the enemies red, so have blue ones instead. But this guide should hopefully give you an idea. I hope I've explained enough already on this point. If you want to spawn them red, how to do that. You simply need people here in this sort of area. You need someone on P3, someone pushed through tin, and then someone pushed up to this top office here blocking hedge spawns, and then the enemy's going to spawn red. Okay, it takes a lot of coordination for that to happen, so it's probably unlikely going to happen by on purpose at least. Moving on to the final hill of Hacienda, and this is a little bit of a weird one. Okay, there isn't really a main set of spawns for this hill. Okay, this is the hill that finds itself on the little rock over here. The game will spawn the next person to spawn in at the furthest point away from their enemies. So sometimes that means a flip, sometimes it means they'll spawn on a similar side. It's a little bit weird one, okay, which is why I'm going to try and explain this slightly differently to how I explain the other hills on this map. The 4 spawns we do have are red car, lobby, hedge, or just outside a hedge, this hedge space bit over here, and then boathouse, okay? There are the 4 main spawn points. Because of how close a blue spawn is to the hill, it is rarely used, okay? The game always pretty much considers this, throughout all of the VODs I've watched to do my research, the game often considers this a non-safe spawn. So the people spawning over this left-hand side of the map tend to just spawn in the boathouse anyway. I typically only saw this blue spawn being used when the players on this left-hand side have killed, pretty much got 3 or 4 down, and the entire enemy team spawning on this right-hand side have literally just spawned in on this pink car, or this pink area here in the red car. Now, blocking-wise, all you have to do to block a spawn is to have someone on your team closer to that spawn than anyone else on your team is closer to another spawn point. Okay, I hope that makes sense. For example, this is going to hopefully enlighten you if it's still a little bit confusing. If you want to stop the enemies from spawning pink or yellow, you simply need someone in this orange oval, okay? Whilst, and at the same time, you need to make sure that nobody on your team is pushed over this orange line. Because what that essentially means is you've got players closer to these 2 spawns than you do this boat spawn, which means the enemy is going to always spawn at this boat so long as you have someone within this oval and no one is pushed over this orange line. The enemy is always going to spawn boat if that happens. Now, if you want the other side, all you have to do is flip it. You have no one push into this orange oval, and but keep someone behind this orange line, and the enemies will always spawn at either one of these 2 spawns. But personally, I don't think that's favourable for your team. I think personally, I prefer to have the pink spawn. It's a lot easier to control the spawns from this side. It's a lot easier to attack from this side, and personally, I prefer to defend it from this side as well. So I prefer to have these pink spawns, and if that is the case, you want to try and make sure someone's always in this pink orange oval, which means they could be top middle watching their P4 cut, so it's not like they're going to be completely useless. They don't have to be all the way back here at the lion. They can be, you know, pushed up to like this corner of the map here, flowers I called it, to watch the top P4 push, and then as long as they don't have anyone on their team pushed over this orange line, the enemies are always going to spawn in the boathouse. The closer, let's say someone does push over this orange line, okay? The further over they are, this orange line, the further in towards the 2 spawns you're going to have to be in order to block it. The problem is you can't have anyone push through. If you have people push through, it spawns them out. It's not ideal. It's better to have everyone on your team use this same analogy and the same strategy where you simply don't cross this orange line, and your team also know you need someone in this orange zone as well to make sure they don't flip. And that's the best way to have it. It gets overcomplicated if you try and think of it otherwise, but that's the simplest way I can put it to you guys, and hopefully it's clear. So yeah, that's my strats on P4. That's how you can manipulate spawns on P4 and Hacienda, and that's pretty much it. That takes us back to all the way to the beginning. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, as I say, you can leave it down in the comments below, or message me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, or Discord. And as I say, this will be updated in my ranked play readable guide shortly after this is uploaded. So I hope you enjoyed the video, hope you found it useful, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao for now.